Governor Kean, I'd like to talk to you about the millionaire's tax and the state's new power to borrow billions of dollars. New Jersey has been through some tough economic times, and that continues. And certainly with the pandemic, we've been hit hard in this state. Governor, I want to ask you, what are your thoughts about this budget and the process?
Well, I'm disturbed about the budget because I've never liked the millionaire's tax because it's a millionaire's tax on top of a millionaire's tax. We have a millionaire's tax already. We passed it under Governor McGreevey. This is a millionaire's tax on top of that. So that gives us some of the highest tax rates in the entire country. And for a state that's already losing dollars, where people are moving out at a rate which approaches the largest dollar drain in the country right now, it's a dangerous thing to do. And we've done it without any studying on who's moving out and how many are moving out and how much money we're already losing. So I think we should be doing things to encourage millionaires to live in New Jersey because they pay the taxes. And when they move out, we have to pay the taxes.
Well, the governor claims that New Jersey could be facing up to $20 billion in debt. That's a staggering number. So he has the power now in this budget, which the state Supreme Court has approved and given him that power to borrow up to $4.5 billion. Your thoughts on that, given the times we're in?
I think it's enormously dangerous. It's fairly easy to understand because it's the same as if your own family. I mean, you can be going through hard times and you have a choice. You can tighten your belt, you can take a little less money here and there, you can do a number of things. Or you can just max out your credit cards. You could just borrow more. But the problem is that money's got to be paid back. And all it is doing is putting off the problem. It's like taking opium. I mean, it feels good for a while, but the consequences are going to be terrible. We've already borrowed in this state more than almost any other state on a per capita basis. We've been ranked with Illinois as one of the most irresponsible states in the country as far as borrowing goes. To add another $4 billion or so on top of that, with no way to pay it back. I mean, nobody has spelled out the way to pay it back. I think it's totally irresponsible. And by the way, no other state is doing it that way. No other state.
Well, Governor, play devil's advocate here. You can't deny that the state is facing a real crisis given the economic woes we've been living through for the last several years and now the pandemic. You faced some very tough economic times early on in your first administration. How does a governor go about the process? How difficult is it to find pockets where, I think what you're saying is where cuts can be made?
It's very, very difficult. I had some tough times. I had the largest budget deficit I inherited when I came into office in the state's history at that point. So we had to do a lot of cutting, and we had a few new taxes. I mean, we had to put a package together. I'm not claiming it was as bad as this one, but I am saying that through that whole period, we kept a AAA bond rating for the state, which means we did it responsibly. Only 3 other states had a AAA bond rating at that point. In other words, we were fiscally one of the most responsible people in the country, and that enabled us to attract new business. And when the economy did turn around, we took full advantage of it. We've already got one of the lowest bond ratings in the country. If we do borrow, it's going to make it worse. They've got a commission to determine when to borrow. The commission is totally partisan. It's 4 Democrats, no Republicans, no impartial people, no independents. The process is wrong. And this is such a serious step. We all should be involved. There should have been a long debate. There should have been programs. There should have been people in both parties involved. And because it's, we're mortgaging the future of the state when we're doing what we can. The budget, I mean, the budget's going up. This budget in the most difficult economic times has gone up. In other words, there's no cutting, no savings whatsoever. Instead, we've added new programs. That's not the right thing to do right now. I mean, I respect the governor. I think he's doing what he thinks is right, but he's putting off the problem. So our children are going to have to pay. Actually, not our children. We'll have to pay. Just have to pay a couple of years later. If they borrow this money, the amount of interest that we're going to have to pay in 2 or 3 years is more than the entire millionaire's tax he just passed. So we'll have millionaire's tax simply to pay the interest on the budget, and that's not even going to be enough.
So, Governor, I'm hearing that you feel that there has not been enough openness, enough transparency in this budget process, as difficult as it's been.
Millionaire's tax, we can argue about that, and I would argue that it's probably not the right thing to do, but the government will argue it's the right thing to do, and I understand that. It's a legitimate argument, but not the debt. I don't think there's a legitimate argument for borrowing $4 billion to a state that's already has too much debt. And when we are just putting off the pain and giving it to the future, there isn't a single way we suggested we're going to be able to pay it off. None. Our taxes are already the highest in the country. You're going to increase taxes more than nobody will stay here. How are you going to pay it off? Can you cut at that point? At that point, it's going to be more difficult to cut because that'll be greater. I love this state. I don't want to mortgage its future, which is, I think, what we're doing right now.
This is New Jersey's first 9-month fiscal budget, the first time in state history. What are the implications of that, Governor?
Well, we shouldn't have done that either, but we should have kept everything on target, I think, for the budget. And if we had to, we've always had problems with amending the budget at later times, so we should have done the budget. But I think it's the way we did it now, less hearings, less public process, less bipartisanship. It just isn't the way to do things. I mean, I know we're in a crisis, and I commend the governor's leadership in a number of ways. But I don't think this was the way to do it, because I think you want more openness, not less. And we've had a lot less openness in this process.
This budget includes a $500 rebate for New Jersey's middle class. It's being billed as a middle class budget for the state, relief for these people, which will come due next year, not this year, 20 and 21. Is that a good idea, Governor, in your thought? I mean, there are so many people, 1 million people out of work in this state as a result of the pandemic. Is that rebate a good idea?
It's a great idea, but not now, because we haven't got the money to do it. It's sort of a feel good, and we won't be able to continue to do it because we won't have the money. So it's just sort of let's feel better about the whole thing, and here's some money. But it's not the thing to do. It really isn't the thing to do, and it's irresponsible. Look, if these were great things to do, you'd see other states doing them. Other states aren't irresponsible. You'd see new millionaires' taxes in New York and Connecticut and Pennsylvania and all the other states. You'd see a lot of borrowing. You're not seeing any of that in these states because those governors and those legislators feel it would be irresponsible to do right now. And I do too.
You've indicated, Governor Kean, that Governor Murphy has handled himself really well during this pandemic. And New Jerseyans agree his popularity has increased over this time period. Let me ask you, as a chief executive, when popularity is running high, how does that make the decision-making process in difficult decisions in difficult times?
Look, I like this guy. We've been friends for a while, and we still are. I don't happen to agree with him in this particular budget. But look, popularity is very, very helpful. So having high poll numbers is very, very helpful. And legislators look at that and they say, we want this governor's help. We want this governor campaigning for us in the district, not against us. And so popularity is good. If you're the governor, it helps. But you should use it to do things that take some courage and you might not be able to do at other times.
Let me ask you this, as a Republican governor, how should the Republicans, and some have voiced their concerns over this budget, how should they continue to make those concerns known to the people of the state?
They should continue to speak out because we still haven't borrowed the money. Maybe we can constrain ourselves a little bit in that process. So the Republican Party should continue to make its points. So should the academics. So should the budget watchers who've already started to talk. And hopefully, the people who echo those sentiments, the news media, the opinion makers, will follow it and will engage in a debate, because we've still got time. We still haven't, we've said we authorized all the borrowing. The borrowing hasn't actually happened yet. And if we can prevent some of it from happening, then we're going to be a lot happier in a couple of years.
What, in your opinion, does the state face in the coming years, paying back through the pension and all of the liabilities that the state is facing? Where would the money, in your estimation, come from? Where would those funds have to be drawn from in terms of government spending?
Look, when the bill comes due, and when a bill comes due from this borrowing, we got to pay. I mean, you can't declare bankruptcy, I don't think, as a state. The federal government's not going to come in and bail you out. So if a major state goes bankrupt, and that's what New Jersey is looking at if we go through with this borrowing, then there's very little places to get the money. There's only one really large, two large blocks in budget. One is the institutions. You can't take money from the institutions. That's to take care of people who are sick. That's the mental institutions, it's the prisons. It's very hard to get money out of that budget, maybe a little bit, but not much. The other big blob, and you don't want to take money from here, is education. That's the largest budget and the largest piece in the whole budget. But, you know, people like me and other people have always wanted to increase education, not decrease it, and make it better, not worse. So you're between a rock and a hard place, because if you go through with this borrowing, in a couple of years down the pike, there's going to be no place to get the money except places where you don't really want to go. And that's the danger. I mean, my friend Brendan Byrne opposed the last two bond issues, which he loved the spending. I mean, he thought it was good spending, higher education, things that we're all for. But he said, we've got no plans of a way to pay the money back. So he said, I can't vote for it. So he voted against those two bond issues. You can only borrow if you have a way to pay it back. And if you can spell out, which nobody's done, how we're going to possibly pay this money back. There is no way to pay money back without taxes that are totally unacceptable and would make us totally a place we can't live. Or you got to cut areas like education institutions that you don't want to cut. Borrowing is never good. You do borrowing only when you have a real legitimate means of paying it back over the years. Transportation Trust Fund, that's an example. I mean, you borrow for that, but you pay it back through the gas tax. That you can do. But borrowing with no means of paying it back is death to a state. I don't want New Jersey to die.
These are difficult times involving difficult decisions.
Yeah.
And thank you very much for sharing your perspective. We do appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Funding for Governor's Perspectives with Kent Manahan has been provided by New Jersey Manufacturers Insurance Group, Seton Hall University, and Seton Hall School of Law.